You're standing in a rented suit that doesn't quite fit, holding a hand that's shaking slightly more than yours. Somewhere behind you, your mother is doing math in her head instead of listening to the vows. You can tell by her face, that specific stillness people get when they're adding numbers instead of feeling things. Everyone tells you this is the happiest day of your life. Nobody mentions it's also the day your family's finances get put on public display, priced, catered, and quietly judged by people who will forget the flowers by Tuesday. This isn't a video about which caterer to pick or which venue photographs best. It's about what a wedding actually costs. Not in dollars, but in what the dollars quietly do to the people standing in that room, long after the room has been packed up and driven away in the back of somebody's minivan. Level 1. You spend $5,000 and the wedding becomes a favor economy. Your cousin does the flowers, learned from a YouTube tutorial 2 weeks before the date. Your uncle brings his sound system and appoints himself DJ, and he's not good at it, and nobody cares. The venue is a community hall your aunt got for half price because she knows the woman who runs the booking calendar. Every single part of this wedding exists because someone who loves you gave up a weekend, a skill, or a favor they were owed. You will spend the next decade paying it back in ways that never appear on a spreadsheet. You'll drive 4 hours to help your cousin move apartments. You'll watch your uncle's kids for a weekend without being asked twice because you remember exactly what he gave you and exactly what it's worth. Favors don't carry interest rates. They compound anyway, quietly, in a currency called obligation, and you'll be making payments on this wedding for years without ever writing a check. Your parents put $2,000 of it on a card they're still paying off 18 months later. Nobody mentions this at the reception. They smile in every photo, genuinely. This isn't a story about resentment. But the debt doesn't show up in a single frame, and it's in almost every one of them anyway, sitting just behind their eyes, the way a headache sits behind a smile you're determined to keep. And here's what nobody warns you about at this level. The relatives who couldn't make it because of the cost of a flight say, gently, over the phone weeks later, "We'll celebrate properly when you have more." As if this one, the one that actually happened, the one with the borrowed sound system and the tutorial flowers, wasn't proper. As if $5,000 and a community hall wasn't the realest thing anyone in that building will witness for years. Level 2. You spend $20,000, and the wedding becomes a loan with a guest list. This is the number that sounds reasonable and isn't. The exact spot where "we saved for this" quietly becomes "we financed the rest of this." The way people finance a car. Except a car depreciates parked in a garage, and this depreciates in a photo album nobody opens after year 3. You hire a real photographer this time, not a friend with a good camera. A real caterer instead of a potluck sign-up sheet. A coordinator who calls you hun and carries an actual binder with tabs. It feels like arriving somewhere. Your mother finally gets to stop doing arithmetic during the vows, and for one afternoon, you watch her simply watch you. And it's worth something you can't quite price. But the bill doesn't disappear because the day did. You'll be paying off a florist's invoice on your first wedding anniversary, and there's a specific, quiet kind of argument that happens in a kitchen at 11 p.m. when one of you brings up the credit card statement and the other one says, tired, "Can we not tonight?" That argument becomes a tradition nobody planned for. It's the reception's real encore, performed monthly, for about 2 years, until the balance finally hits zero and neither of you throws a party for it. Level 3. You spend $75,000, and the wedding becomes a comparison. This is roughly the national average now, which should tell you something uncomfortable about what average has quietly become in 15 years. At this level, you're not just planning a wedding. You're benchmarking against every wedding your 200 guests have ever attended, whether you meant to enter that competition or not. The guest list turns into a spreadsheet with unspoken tiers nobody wrote down, but everybody understands. Who gets invited to the rehearsal dinner, and who gets the reception only? Who gets a +1, and who has to come alone and pretend it doesn't sting? Who gets seated near the front, close enough to matter, and who gets seated near the bathroom? A single seating decision that will quietly end a 19-year friendship, and neither of you will ever say the real reason why. Your future mother-in-law has opinions now, and the opinions have budgets attached to them. And somehow the budgets are yours to solve, not hers to fund. You spend more hours that year managing a shared Pinterest board than you spend having an actual uninterrupted conversation with your own fiancé. The wedding becomes a project with stakeholders, a timeline, a kickoff meeting disguised as a dinner. Love is somewhere in the org chart, technically in charge, rarely consulted, occasionally overruled by someone's aunt. You'll remember the seating chart argument longer than you'll remember most of the actual ceremony. That's not a flaw in your memory. That's precisely what $75,000 does to a single day. It fills it with enough decisions that the decisions themselves become the day, and the vows become the 15 calmest minutes inside 4 months of low-grade conflict. Level 4. You spend $200,000, and the wedding becomes a production. Somewhere around here, the day stops being about the two of you and starts being an event other people attend the way they'd attend a premiere. There's a production timeline printed and laminated. A videographer who says things like, "Let's grab a candid moment," right before carefully staging one. There's a welcome dinner, a rehearsal dinner, a day after brunch, an entire long weekend engineered to justify the flights your 240 guests took to be there. You hire a wedding planner whose actual job, if you're honest with yourself, is managing your extended family's feelings about money without you ever having to. She's better at handling your relatives than you are. She's watched this exact fight about the guest list unfold 40 times before at 40 other weddings, and she has a script for de-escalating it that she never shares with you directly. You simply notice, somehow, that the explosive argument you were bracing for never quite arrives, and you never find out what she said in the hallway to prevent it. Somewhere in the 8 months of planning, you quietly stop asking, "Do we want this?" and start asking, "Will this look like we could afford it?" Those are two entirely different questions with two entirely different answers. And by the time you notice you've spent months answering only the second one, it's too late in the timeline to go back and ask the first one properly. Your actual wedding day involves roughly 400 small decisions made by other people on your behalf before you're even awake. You spend the morning getting your makeup done by someone you will never see again in your life, while your actual partner is in another room 300 feet away doing the same thing, and the two of you don't really speak, don't really connect, until you're already standing at the altar being watched by 300 people, 40 of whom you've personally met exactly once, at a work event, 6 years ago. Level 5. You spend $500,000, and the wedding stops being yours entirely. At this level, nobody in the room is actually celebrating. They're attending. There's a difference, and everyone can feel it, even if nobody says it out loud over the champagne. The wedding has become a corporate product launch with a religious ceremony bolted onto the front of it for tradition's sake. There's a step-and-repeat backdrop for photos, the exact kind you'd see outside a movie premiere, complete with a hired photographer whose only job is that wall. There's a seating chart negotiated like a peace treaty between two families who are functionally merging companies, not just households. Someone's assistant emails someone else's assistant about dietary restrictions for a guest neither of you has spoken to in 6 years, but who absolutely had to be invited. For reasons that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with a business relationship your father doesn't want to jeopardize over a wedding invitation. You will not remember most of your own wedding. This isn't a metaphor or an exaggeration for effect. Research on high-stress, high-stimulus events consistently shows memory genuinely fragments under that much orchestrated pressure and sensory overload, and a $500,000 wedding is, structurally, closer to a live television production than it is to an intimate ceremony between two people. You'll watch the professionally edited film of it months later and see entire moments you have no memory of standing inside, wearing your own face, saying your own vows. Somewhere in the 400 guests, there's a couple who spent $5,000 on their own wedding 15 years ago, invited because they're old family friends from before any of this money existed. They will spend the entire reception doing a quiet calculation neither of them says out loud. Not about how much this cost, they don't care about that part, but about how much of the actual couple got lost somewhere inside the production of it. They remember their own wedding day in complete, stubborn detail. Every guest, every toast, every off-key song from a drunk uncle with a borrowed microphone. You will remember a highlight reel, expertly color-graded, edited by someone you hired and will never speak to again. Somewhere right now, a person is standing in a rented suit that doesn't quite fit, holding a shaking hand, watching their mother do quiet math instead of listening to the vows. They think the math is about affording this particular day. It isn't. Not really. Not underneath. The math every parent runs in that exact moment is the same one at every dollar amount on this entire list. Whether the love standing at the front of the room is the kind that survives whatever comes after the flowers are thrown out with the rest of the trash on Monday morning. The wedding was never really about the money. The money was just the thing everyone quietly agreed to argue about instead, because a florist's invoice is so much easier to fight over than the real question sitting underneath it. That you're terrified, that you hope this lasts, that no amount of money in the room, at any level, can guarantee the only thing anyone actually drove or flew or saved up to come and witness.